She had not chosen this path for herself. Eleanor Whitmore, the youngest daughter of a struggling family back east, had been bundled into a train with little more than a worn carpetbag and her mother's faded shawl. Her father's debts had weighed heavily on them for years, and when a newspaper clipping offering brides for good Christian men out west had been passed to him, he had looked at her with those tired eyes that no longer held softness. She had understood, even before he spoke, she was to go. It was not spoken as a choice but as a necessity, her sacrifice to secure her family's survival. And so, Eleanor had bowed her head and agreed, even though her heart longed for a life shaped by her own will. The journey was long, filled with rattling wheels and strangers, stares. She pressed her shawl tightly around her shoulders each night, whispering prayers she wasn't sure God still heard. She wondered about the man waiting for her. A rancher, she had been told. His name was Daniel Reed. She knew only what the agency had written in their letters, that he owned land, that he was unmarried, and that he had sent money for her passage. To Eleanor, it sounded more like a transaction than a marriage. She feared she was little more than another hired hand, or worse, property to be managed. When the train finally screeched into the small town station in Wyoming, her stomach churned with nerves. Dust swirled in the air as she stepped down onto the platform. Men leaned against posts, eyeing her like cattle at an auction, and she clutched her carpetbag tighter. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a tall man approached. He was broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with a steady gaze beneath the brim of his hat. He stopped a respectful distance away and tipped it to her. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was deep, carrying both strength and a gentleness she hadn't expected. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. "I'm Daniel Reed," he said. "I reckon you've come a long way. Let's get you out of this crowd." He didn't reach for her bag without asking, didn't try to touch her hand until she offered it. That small restraint startled her more than anything. She had braced herself for ownership, for commands, but instead, she found courtesy. Still, fear sat in her chest like a stone. The wagon ride to his ranch was quiet, except for the creak of wheels and the occasional whinny of the horses. Eleanor's eyes darted over the open plains, the endless sky, the mountains in the distance. It was beautiful, but it felt so vast, so foreign, that she thought she might be swallowed whole. Daniel glanced at her a few times, as if wanting to speak, but he gave her space. Finally, when the ranch house came into view, a sturdy structure of wood and stone surrounded by fields, Daniel drew a slow breath. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I want to set something straight before you step foot in that house. I asked for a bride because life out here is lonesome, and I do want a family. But I'm not here to own you. You're not property. You're not payment for a debt. You're a woman, and if you'll have me, you'll be my partner, not my servant." The words nearly undid her. She had held herself stiff for days, expecting harshness, but his voice carried no demand, only honesty. She swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. You mean that?" Daniel met her gaze and nodded. "I've worked this land with my own 2 hands. I know what it means to earn something. I don't want a wife who feels like she was bought. I want one who chooses to stay." Eleanor looked down at her lap, fingers twisting the fabric of her shawl. No man had ever asked what she wanted before. She didn't know how to answer, not yet. But something in her chest loosened, as if a door had cracked open. The first days on the ranch were awkward, filled with unspoken questions and quiet observations. Daniel gave her the upstairs bedroom with the lace curtains his mother had once sewn, while he took the smaller room downstairs. He showed her where everything was kept, how the stove worked, and where she could find flour and sugar, but he never once demanded she cook or clean. When she tried to do chores, he often stepped in beside her, rolling up his sleeves, as if the work was meant to be shared. At night, Eleanor would sit on the porch, staring at the stars that stretched farther than she had ever seen. Sometimes Daniel joined her, sipping coffee from a tin cup. They talked little at first, but his presence was steady, like a warm blanket against the chill. Slowly, she began to ask him questions, about the cattle, about his parents who had passed on, about the storms he'd weathered alone. He answered honestly, sometimes with a quiet smile, sometimes with a shadow in his eyes. One evening, when the wind carried the scent of sage across the land, Daniel asked her about her life back east. She hesitated, then told him about her father's debts, about her brothers who had eaten while she sewed dresses late into the night, about her mother who had kissed her cheek but not fought to keep her home. She admitted her fear, that she had been sent here like a parcel, expected to endure whatever awaited her. Daniel listened without interruption. When she finished, he set his cup down and said softly, "I won't be another chain around your neck, Eleanor. If ever you want to leave, I'll see you safely on a train myself. But I hope, in time, you'll want to stay." Her throat tightened with tears she couldn't hide. No one had ever offered her freedom before. Weeks turned to months. Eleanor found herself learning the rhythm of ranch life, the early mornings, the smell of hay, the satisfaction of bread rising in the oven. She laughed for the first time in years when a calf tried to nibble her skirt. Daniel's quiet pride when he saw her settling in made her heart flutter in ways she hadn't expected. He never pressed for closeness, but his patience itself drew her nearer. One stormy night, when thunder rattled the windows, Eleanor woke in fear, memories of her father's anger and the long journey pressing down on her. She crept downstairs and found Daniel sitting by the fire, keeping watch over the restless night. Without thinking, she whispered, "May I sit with you?" He looked up, surprised, then nodded. She wrapped her shawl tighter and sat near him, the firelight painting shadows on the walls. After a long silence, she said, I want to stay." Daniel's eyes softened. He didn't move closer, didn't press, only said, "Then I'll do everything I can to make this a home you choose, not a cage you endure." Something inside her broke open at those words, the last piece of fear she had carried. Slowly, she reached for his hand. His palm was rough with years of labor, but the warmth that flowed from it was steady, safe. For the first time, Eleanor believed she might not just survive, but truly live. And so, their life together began, not as master and servant, not as buyer and bought, but as two souls learning to trust, to share burdens, to build love out of respect. The ranch became not just Daniel's land but theirs, and the stars above no longer seemed so far or so cold. Eleanor had been sent west as a bride with no choice. But in Daniel's steady heart, she had found something far greater than she ever expected: freedom, partnership, and a love that asked nothing but her willing hand in.